De Amerikaanse conservatieve activiste Candace Owens gaat regelmatig viraal op sociale media. Ze heeft bijna 5 miljoen volgers op X en haar filmpjes en podcasts worden vele tientallen miljoenen keren bekeken en beluisterd. De 35-jarige Owens is een regelrechte superster op rechts en vaak in de buurt te vinden van andere influencers en politieke zwaargewichten zoals oud-president Donald Trump. Ze was onlangs in Nederland en Ongehoord Nederland had de kans even met haar te spreken over alles waar ze zich mee bezighoudt en ook even vooruit te kijken naar de Amerikaanse presidentsverkiezingen van eind dit jaar.
Right, Candace Owens, welcome to Holland.
Thank you.
Welcome to Amsterdam.
Thank you.
Have you been enjoying the country?
Absolutely love it.
Yeah?
Absolutely love it. I would already say it's one of my favorite European cities.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Well, we've had some nice weather there today, but it's been raining for 5 months.
Yeah.
Don't know what that's about. It must be climate change.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what do we do all the honor?
Well, I'm speaking here, which I'm very excited about, and it's just interesting to see sort of the same topics and the same feelings that we're having in America are translating overseas, and everybody's sort of asking important questions about their national identity and or whether or not we're allowed to have a national identity, I guess, is really what it's about. And so, yes, I was invited to speak here, and I'm very glad to be here.
Oh, well, it's great to have you. And thank you for joining Ongehoord Nederland. It's great to have you on the show. Now, you're a political activist, or so it reads on your X profile. What made you that? I mean, what turned you towards conservative activism?
I always say that I fell into politics quite accidentally. I had no ambitions. I didn't study politics when I was at university. What happened for me is I was paying attention to the political landscape when Trump was actually running for president.
In 2016.
Mm-hmm. And I was not a conservative at all. I would have said I was a liberal. I wasn't politically engaged. And I think that's the majority of people. I think they're sort of asleep at the wheel, not politically inclined, and just sort of accepting whatever the mainstream media is telling them, which would necessarily make them a liberal in America, left-leaning. And I just didn't believe the magic flip on the narrative regarding Trump, which is to say that he was in the cultural sphere for decades and everybody loved him. Exactly. And then all of a sudden he announced he's running for president and the media was like, actually, that man wants you to be enslaved if you're black, and his rhetoric is just like Adolf Hitler. It was way too rapid of a flip for me, and I just started, poked my head up and went, what is this? And I made a couple of YouTube videos kind of mocking that narrative, the idea of like black Americans, going back onto slave ships. It was just totally bizarre. And the videos started going viral on YouTube. I would probably say it was my 3rd or 4th video, and it went viral worldwide. It got like 26 million views. And then I got, the call from some major networks, would you like to come on an appearance? And honestly, the rest is kind of history or future, whichever way you look at it.
It took off from there.
Yeah,
right.
It's been a bit of a rocket ship.
We don't really see activism on the right. Conservatives aren't really activist by nature. We see it on the left.
Right.
But we don't see it so much on the right. Why do you think that is?
I think it's because the left has won the narrative in the school systems. So if in the American school system, obviously everyone goes to public school, and what is public school? You're heavily propagandized to think that action and getting involved means that you support leftist causes. Tons of pick and choose, whether it's environmentalism or believing that racism or feminism is around the corner. That is very much what's being impressed upon you. Yeah. In public school. So that's what you're seeing. You're young, you got energy, and you care, and the only way that you're taught how to care and you're not aware of your own propagandized brain is to jump into a leftist cause.
Yeah, exactly. But you're also a mother of 3.
I am, yes.
Yeah, recently married a couple of years back, and a mother of 3 young children.
Yes, I've had 3 kids in 3 years. I'm heroic. This is the first time I haven't been pregnant in so long. I'm just getting used to it, not being pregnant.
My wife would concur.
Yeah.
So, to what extent does being a mother fuel your activism?
It's really funny because when I got pregnant, I remember I was listening to someone's podcast, and the young woman said, motherhood really softened me, is what she was saying. And it was the reason why she wanted everyone to become a mother, And she's a conservative and she's really brilliant, but I had the exact opposite experience. Like, motherhood actually really hardened me, not towards my children, but towards the world. Like, I think before, when you're debating these topics, obviously it's an intellectual debate, but when you have children, that debate becomes existential, which is to say that it's no longer just like, what is the better idea? This is like, no, if we don't get this right, my children are going to suffer in the future.
Stakes are a lot higher.
Right. The stakes got a lot higher, and so I became more hardened for battle.
Yeah. Most parents would concur with that. I think they'd see it the same way. Now, you founded the what's known as the Blexit organization. I mean, it's an organization advocating black Americans to leave the Democratic Party or leave the left. Right? You're essentially calling for that. But why should they? Is the Democratic Party not the party of John Kennedy and the Civil Rights Act?
Well, it definitely is or was the party of the Civil Rights Act. But again, when you learn history, and this was one of the things when I really started falling down the figurative rabbit hole of understanding that, you know, within the public school system, they give you an education, but it's not a proper education. They pick and they choose what they tell you about your history. So yes, people would say, you know, LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson, signed the Civil Rights Act, and so that's why blacks should be married to the Democrat Party forever. But what they don't teach you in school is that Lyndon Baines Johnson was an avowed racist. He, you know, voted against every single measure to give black people their rights when he was in the Senate for decades. And he essentially signed the Civil Rights Act with a figurative gun to his head because the nation was on fire. You know, you had the assassination of JFK, you had riots in the street over civil rights, and he had to get something done. But with one hand, he signed that, and with the next, he signed our virtual imprisonment, welfarism, and the Great Society Act. And he was on record as having said, I will have those N-words voting Democrat for the next 200 years.
Yes, exactly.
So it's selective history.
The saying, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So then you learn in the textbook, oh, Lyndon Baines Johnson and the Democratic Party are your heroes. You're not actually learning proper history. And when you do learn proper history, as I did following Trump, I kind of just started reading books and reading authors and learning real history. I just felt, I would say I went through a period of cognitive dissonance, kind of thinking like up is down and down is up is a very kind of a scary thing to go through, you know, like everything you learned was a lie.
I know.
Good luck, right?
Yeah.
And then I was very angry by how duped black Americans had been, and I established Blexit as a means to properly educate black Americans about their history, because undoubtedly once you learn it, you become a conservative.
Right, but I mean, Johnson was right though, wasn't he? I mean, Democrats have held a tight grip on the black vote.
He was successful.
And what has allowed them to maintain that?
The Great Society Act, welfarism. You know, he gave a speech when he signed the Great Society Act and essentially said that this is what was owed to black Americans. Like, now we're going to help you. And I think it was Reagan who said, if the government ever says that they want to help, shut the door. And he was very right in that measure. And so with one hand, he broke down the black family. You know, welfarism incentivizes bad behavior. We'll give you more money if you don't marry the father of your children. And as soon as you break down the family, every other social ill follows. You know.
Yeah. I want to talk to you about nationalism and globalism. Right now, I've always understood America as being, you know, fiercely patriotic. You know, you have the anthem at the baseball games, you have the Pledge of Allegiance in schools. You know, I remember Carl Lewis harvesting gold medals at the Olympics, brandishing the stars and stripes. You know, Ronald Reagan protecting the free world from the evil empire, the evil Soviet Union. You know, I grew up watching Rocky movies. You know, they're fiercely patriotic, right? But apparently, you know, there's some things happened there where that you label yourself, you call yourself a nationalist, and then we see Congressman Ted Lieu having a go at you in Washington.
Yeah.
And comparing you to Adolf Hitler for being a nationalist.
Right.
I mean, how do you deal with attacks like that?
I don't deal with them. I actually think that I've done such a good job of going directly to the people that the people have never been more awake in terms of the lying and the smearing and the libeling. And I defend myself. And that's something that I think that most people don't do. They feel very discouraged when they're called a name that they aren't. I mean, it's a lie. It used to be so heavy. I mean, imagine I'm just like, you're a racist. And you're like, I've never done anything racist my entire life. But I say, well, if you don't support BLM, you're a racist. If you don't support Black Lives Matter, you're a racist. You know, it makes people fearful to speak out. I've never had an issue speaking out. And to be honest, when people use those tactics, these tired tactics of smearing and libeling people, I feel further encouraged
Is
to
it
go
not,
deeper.
Is that not like a byproduct of the identity politics employed by the left?
Right, it is. And you're starting to see that on the right as well, where they want to smear you out of having a conversation. Like I said, I do think we are seeing the end of that, or at least the beginning of the end, because it's not working. It's not diminishing anybody's platform. At least for me, I have seen that the stronger I stand up against it, the more respect I earn amongst the population, the people. And if the people believe in you, who cares what the establishment thinks? That's always been my perspective. And nationalism, as I've said for a long time, is not a dirty word. The concept of trying to correlate that to Adolf Hitler, which has very much happened in America, is wrong and ill-fitted in my personal belief. And I think the reason that they do that is because you have people who are globalists who don't want people to have an identity. You have these cultural Marxists who don't want people to have an identity, who try to make these things synonymous with white supremacy. Like, if you're proud of being English, if you're proud of being Irish, they'll paint you as a white supremacist. Again, another name that's supposed to make you feel discouraged. We all need to stand up to that. We all need to stop allowing these names to define the conversations that we have.
Well, then the globalists would say, why do you have an issue with globalism? We're advocating world peace, security, equality. They're all good things, right?
Those are all the things that they're trying to sell to you, while we're all looking around our countries and going, that's the sales pitch. But actually, it looks like everything that's happening is the opposite. It's cultural rot.
It's not about that?
Nope. It's cultural rot, and it feels a bit now like 1984, George Orwellian nightmare that we're living in. It's the disappearance of history. It's rotting architecture, things that are beautiful, things that once inspired us to create. It's also an attack on Christianity, which is where I have really dug my heels in here, in recognizing that you can dress up what's happening in the world in many different ways. But I believe that what we're actually experiencing is a holy war, and we always have been experiencing a holy war, and it has been an attack on Christianity. And America has become the playground for that, Christianity.
Now, nationalism has gained quite a lot of traction in Europe and across the world. We've had Donald Trump, obviously, in 2016, winning, getting 75 million votes, which was a record for a sitting president, obviously losing the election. But we've had Geert Wilders, right-wing party, win the elections here in November. We've had Orban in Hungary. We've had Sweden Democrats in Sweden. They're in government at the moment. There's elections in Belgium with the right set for victory there. To what do you attribute the rise of that movement?
I think part of it is spiritual. I think I have very much felt within my own soul and in the conversations that I've had with my husband that, I don't know, just there's this sort of awakening going on. And I think we're just inching ever so closely to losing the world and into something that I don't say this ironically, and I think people should be careful when you say this and think about what you're saying when you say it's satanic. What is happening is satanic worldwide, right? It is the inversion of truth. It is again, something that used to be taught in American school systems was the Bible. That got wiped away in the 70s, and that was ever intentional. But it is choosing people, telling people rather, to look at something and not to believe their own eyes, right? Men can be women. Women can be men. And I think that globally, the satanic narrative was very much about to set, and then suddenly people are kind of looking around going, what is happening? And
what woke them up? Was it Donald Trump?
I think there's a lot of elements happening at once. There's not one person. For me, obviously, Donald Trump played a very big role in it because I just started to see the lies, but I also think there have been agendas that just are too crazy. Again, transgenderism, children is something that is a big issue right now in America. Trying to encourage children to harm their own bodies by taking pills that will effectively ruin the rest of their lives. I think these pills just got banned in the UK actually, because it ultimately sterilizes children, and yet you have people
puberty blockers.
Puberty blockers. Yes, it sterilizes children. They've always known that it sterilizes adults. It's the same medicine that is used to sterilize pedophiles in prison, just being repurposed for children. If you are too fearful to stand up and to call that evil, we don't need you. Seriously, and I say this when a parent, I know it's wrong, and parents quietly to me at school, I know it's wrong, but I don't want to say anything, and I look at them and just think, the idea that you would allow this evil to take place because you want to fit in socially, I mean, that is a weakness and a cowardice that I will never understand.
No.
And so I think because it became too satanic, it inspired an awakening amongst a bunch of people, and people are willing to fight. And when you see one person fighting, it makes it easier for you to fight. And so it's a beautiful thing to see.
All right, good. Now, we're in Amsterdam, and I don't know if you've noticed on the way in, in this beautiful hotel, there's many rainbow banners out in Amsterdam, and I can tell you that the woke mob is pretty rampant here, And this is it's being sold as a movement that's fighting for this acceptance, supposedly, of those left out, gays, lesbians, transsexuals, and the various categories thereof and whatnot else. Is that a fair claim that they're making?
It's an ignorant claim that they're making, and I try not to fault people for their own ignorance, because I was ignorant once, and like I said, I understand when the school systems, which essentially are, pick your category, Stalin youth programs, right? They're giving you propaganda that fosters the state's incentives, or furthers the state's incentives rather, and what they're learning consistently in the school system, I speak all across universities, is that, again, they're fighting for a social justice. And so the people that you see marching are not bad people, right? They've been intentionally miseducated in what we could really describe as miseducation camps, the public school systems. But the people that are putting this sort of stuff in the textbooks are evil.
But in view of the time, we'd like to move on to feminism now.
Yeah.
Would you say you're a feminist?
I am the opposite of a feminist. Unfortunately, I'm too educated about the feminist movement and its origins and its explicit aims to destroy the family unit, and so I'm not interested in feminism.
But is feminism merely reserved for the left?
Well, I think I used to have said that I was a feminist because, obviously, like I said, when you're a liberal and you learn about these things in schools, you sort of are told that this is just about equality between the sexes, and actually it's about the complete division of the sexes. It's about making women hate men and believe that everything is an act of the patriarchy. The patriarchy is behind every corner, and it perverts natural relations between men and women, and so I am definitively not a feminist.
No, but yet you're out and about, a strong woman with strong opinions, and I mean, you travel the world, you're on TV and online, publishing. Aren't you advocating women's rights in a way?
No, I don't think I am. I hope that when people are watching and listening,
or the right for women to choose conservatism.
I think that's the sales pitch of feminism, that it's just about having a choice and allowing women to choose. The reality is that when you pay attention to this generation, a lot of conservatives make fun of these young girls that are on TikTok and they're crying about how overwhelmed they are and they can't afford their rent and they're working all day, and they don't know where that comes from. Decisions that were made from a very fringe radical movement of feminists who were actually working at the behest of the government to destroy the family. And it's, a lot of the ills that we face in society today is because women used to be at home raising their kids, paying attention to what was happening in the school systems, and now the state is essentially raising children. And in every capacity, on my podcast, on my show, online, I really encourage women not to accept the feminist garbage, that it's bad to be a mother that's engaged with their children and to aspire to be at home.
Yeah. Something you've also come out against is birth control, or the pill as we call it. Mm-hmm. What's the issue there?
Everything, once you learn the history of it. So I have a show, and I'm smeared as an anti-vaxxer. I don't want that to be a smear. I want to embrace that. I'm against vaccines. I am against hormonal birth control. You're not hurting my feelings by pointing that out. I've done the research. I've looked into the history of it. Birth control is exactly what it sounds like. They thought of it as something that needs to be propagandized to control the birth rate. It's a movement that is steeped in eugenicism. The Passing of the Great Race was the book that was the most well-read book in the world at that time, in the progressive era, throughout the progressive era, and it was basically a pseudoscience, and it worried about the preservation of the races, and basically taught that you could train people not to procreate, with the right propaganda. Margaret Sanger literally wrote a piece called Birth Control Propaganda and talked about how men breed their cattle with more care than we breed humanity. And so the great thinkers of that time, always the Yale and the Harvard crowd, thought up the eugenicist movement, and birth control was created with that in mind.
Right, but the women may not want to have children all the time.
Well, first off, is to get educated about your own body. I think it's very funny that people think that if you don't have birth control, then you're going to have 22 kids, you're going to be pregnant the whole time. That's not really how it works, right? That actually, you got to get a little more educated on the topic of your own body if you think that that's how it works. Actually, what ends up being the case is most women stop taking birth control once they are married, and then they're struggling to have kids. It's the circumstance. But you should never take a synthetic hormone that works as brain medicine, that is quite literally in the insert says that it causes ovarian cancer, breast cancer. Yeah. Synthetic hormones are a cancer-causing agent. Yeah. Women aren't educated about any of that when they're handed packs of birth control and they're poisoning their bodies routinely. And then when they want to have kids years later and they go, I don't know why I can't get pregnant. Well, the answer is because you've been taking a drug for decades, a drug that was created to stop you from procreating.
So you're saying keep it natural.
Keep it natural.
Elections coming up in November. First of all, you're taking the sitting president, Joe Biden. What would your approval rating of him be?
What is the kind way to say this? Because it does feel like elder abuse when you say anything about him. It has been the story of elder abuse. I mean, it's obvious that he is not the president, right? He's just a puppet. He can't remember what he ate for breakfast. It's very strange, and the whole world can see that weakness. What I see when I look at Joe Biden, I lost my grandfather, who I was very close to a couple of years ago. And when you see early onset dementia, which my grandfather had, he's showing all of the clinical signs for that. His gait, the way that he falls, because you do start forgetting how to walk, and your body signals are not working in the way that they should. The anger, how he kind of goes from like talking, and then all of a sudden he's like angry and does something like that. My grandfather would start to do that. And there's a frustration with sort of not being able to recall things correctly. And so he's showing all of the clinical signs of dementia, and the entire world can see that. And so my suspicion is that because they've done a very good job of not letting him speak much at all, my suspicion is that when he does speak, they're probably just giving him, a little boost of something, nothing illegal. Right. Yeah, nothing illegal, just a little
All right.
Yeah, and
but then still, we do have the Biden administration in office then, even if what you're saying is true, and he's
correct. That's my point.
He's not really in charge.
He's not in charge. Obviously, he's not in charge.
They are making policy decisions, and one of them on immigration has led to now 8 million migrants expected to arrive, newly arrived in the U.S., be living in the U.S. by October of this year. That's quite a substantial amount. What effect are those numbers having on U.S. society?
It's going to be tremendous. I think that's ultimately their goal in terms of overthrowing the election. At the same time that they're fighting for people to get over the border, they're also in certain states saying you don't need an ID to vote. That's their new thing. You should not have to have an ID to vote. And so I think what they're going to do is get them into the crucial swing states. You've got these middle of the night flights going into these swing states, and then they're going to offer these individuals welfare and try to fundamentally change our election results. That's what I believe. And these are things that are called a conspiracy, right? It was called a conspiracy when Trump said he wanted to build the wall. Yeah. And now everyone's like, oh no, there actually is an issue happening at the border. There's an invasion happening at our border. It's quite ironic that Americans are being told that we need to defend Ukraine's borders and Israel's borders, but God forbid we want to dedicate some money into defending our own. It is obviously something nefarious going on. They're receiving a program, and you'll see this if you do intend on going to the border. They're being handed folders and given step-by-step guides by the UN of how to enter the country, even a drop-off point of where to drop their IDs so people don't know who they are. So there's just a pile of IDs at a certain location. So this is a well-funded invasion. People are flying in. They are people from China are coming over the border. Did you see these reports? They're just showing you they're well dressed. It's like they're going on a hike, like it's a trip, that are coming over the borders, and they're openly talking to reporters about their intention to come into America. Kazakhstan, people are coming into the border. So this is not...
Oh, the Mexican border.
Yeah. The news reports talking to these individuals about how they're coming in for better opportunities. I mean, they're well dressed, and by the way, they're all single males. So now that whole narrative of people looking for a chance and it's just a better chance over the border. It's none of that. This is a well-funded effort. There is an invasion happening at the southern border, and Americans are finally waking up to it, but I fear it's too late.
Yeah. Do you think Biden will get reelected?
I have lost faith in the election process in America. I don't know. I'm out of the political prognostications because a lot of things happen in America that never used to happen. Middle of the night, sorry, we can't count the votes. We used to be able to count the votes on election night. Now all of a sudden we need weeks, we need days. So I am just reserving, I'm out of the game of any political process.
Well, then let's move on to Donald Trump, then the other candidate.
Yeah.
Well, he's respected to be the other candidate. Haley's dropped out. He's going to win the nomination for the Republican Party. Are you a Republican? Would you consider yourself a Republican?
I consider myself a conservative first, and I will be voting Republican. Yeah.
What's your relationship with Donald Trump?
I actually just saw him. I went to a UFC fight with him and Dana White, MMA fighting in about 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
So are you good?
Yeah.
One would think that you were ideologically aligned.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah, absolutely.
And how close are you to it?
Oh, I mean, how close can you be to somebody that busy, right?
Are we going to see a Trump Owens ticket in November?
No, I am not interested in running. People ask me that all the time, and the truth is, I think that I am more effective on the outside and taking the risks and having the conversations that people need to have. And I just don't think that there's that much that can be done as the VP. How am I going to affect more change? As the vice president? Or as a person that's able to reach millions of people from my social media feed and get them to look at certain stories and to have this conversation about real history and talking about birth control, what's going to have more of a cultural impact?
But Donald Trump's fiercely popular.
He is.
And what do you think is allowing him to get all these people rallying behind him?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's the understanding that we're dangerously close to losing our country. I also think it's people like me who just saw what they did to him and just flipped the narrative. People don't believe in a narrative flip that quickly, similarly to what we were just talking about with them. Candace is an anti-Semite. It's like, oh, really? Now? The last two organizations she worked for were Jewish-owned, pro-Israel. She just one day woke up. So people are not falling for the narratives, and I think that they're frustrated because when it comes to Trump, they didn't just smear and libel Trump, they smear and libeled all of his supporters too. And they labeled everybody who was just worried about, gas prices as white supremacists, and that actually had the opposite desired effect. It tethered them to him more because they realized how much the media doesn't just hate Trump, but fundamentally resents Americans.
This is Ongehoord Nederland. We're a tiny Dutch network.
Ongehoord
Nederland, yeah.
Ongehoord Nederland.
Yeah, unheard Holland, really.
Yes.
The unheard voices of many people, and like you in many ways, our network is getting cancelled too. You're somewhat of an expert in dealing with getting cancelled. Any message to our viewers and our supporters?
Yeah, I think the best way to deal with it is fearlessly. If you fear that you're being canceled, don't worry about it, because I think, like I said, we're on the brink of a mass awakening, a global awakening. And so what you're seeing, the desperation of the attacks, I always smile and I always laugh, because that's how you know that we're inching ever closer. They are worried. They've lost control of the narrative, which is why they've become so extreme in their demands for censorship. The underground movement isn't so underground anymore. Where the underground movement has become quite mainstream, and it's great. The more they cancel people, they go from far right and they come inward and inward and inward, and suddenly they're canceling the moderates. Know that we're close. That's what I would say to people.
Right. So Ongehoord Nederland should just keep going.
Just keep going, like you don't even care. Don't even pay attention to the smears, the libels. They don't work. We're winning.
All right. Well, great. Candace Owens, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
That's great. Thank you.
You did great.
Did I? I was a little nervous though, wasn't I?
I was a little nervous.
I did drop the ball there once.
No, you were totally fine. That was very fun.
That was great.